everybody, to Chaldean News Radio. We have a special interview today with Amanda Elias, who works for Mayor Duggan as the Deputy Group Executive for Neighborhood Economic Development. And that's a new position, isn't it?
It is a new position. It sits under the Jobs and Economy Team umbrella, newly created. I'm thrilled the mayor's prioritizing this. I've been kind of informally doing the job when I was under the Jobs and Economy Team just a couple years ago, and he pulled me into his office and said, "This is what I need," and I said it was the best day of my life because it's what I'm passionate about. And so I started last week, right when the article came out.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
So if you don't know yet, Amanda was featured in our February issue. In an article written by Paul Natinsky. We did a profile on her and her history, and then how she ended up in the mayor's office in Detroit. And it's a beautiful article. You should certainly check it out, but we're going to go over a lot of it here too. So if you haven't read it or you don't like to read, that's okay. Now, one thing I noticed when you told me that you got promoted is that you kind of mentioned this role that didn't exist in the mayor's office.
Yep.
You said there's no real Office of Development Services. Is this kind of what you've become now in the last week?
Yeah, it kind of is. It's actually probably half the job now. The mayor's expanded it like he normally does with any job. But it's a job that, like I said, I had been doing when I was on the Jobs and Economy Team. And even when I moved over to government affairs, I still kind of maintained that the relationships with developers who needed help navigating the city. I mean, you talk to small developers, frankly, large developers, the number one thing that they talk about, their biggest problem in the city is being able to navigate the bureaucracy, being able to get a building permit, just getting them to a shovel in the ground or their doors being open, right? It's the hardest thing for some reason. And, even a tax abatement, takes longer than it should, right, in the city. And so I'd been working on it informally, and I've always kind of dubbed it this Office of Development Services that we never really had, and I always thought we should have. And so when the mayor called me into his office and said, this is what I'm looking for, and I'm like, you mean an Office of Development Services? He's like, you're totally right. That's what I'm thinking. Along with, building out these commercial corridors. So that's what the job is, right? We have these strategic neighborhoods. We formed a fund called the Strategic Neighborhood Fund that essentially pours money into these neighborhoods, right? So your JP Morgan, your Kresge is pouring money into these neighborhoods across the city. There's one neighborhood in each district. And what my job is going to be is to focus on the corridors in these neighborhoods, right? So mayor's going to drive down Dexter, he's going to drive down Gratiot, and he's going to say, why is that building vacant when we own it? There should be a plan for that. So what I'm doing now I'm currently building out a team, and what I'm doing now is going through every corridor in an SNF neighborhood, inventorying every parcel on that corridor and categorizing each parcel, whether it's, vacant, publicly owned, vacant, privately owned, commercial, privately owned, whatever it is, and then having an intervention for every single parcel. So we'll put that in front of the mayor, and that'll be kind of our master plan that we follow to build out these commercial corridors. The mayor's theme for his term, his third term, is blight to beauty. So he's like the article says, he's very focused on, changing the physical landscape of the city, making it beautiful. And that's what we're doing on these corridors.
Why do you think that's such an important goal? It makes sense economically, but there's also this stigma that Detroit has had for many decades, since before you and I were born, that it's a kind of a fallen off city. It went into a downturn in the 60s or earlier, and now a lot of that stuff is just exacerbated. There are some new projects that are really exciting, I think, but when people think of Detroit, even people who live out here in the suburbs, or when I talk to people who are from other cities, they're like, isn't it dangerous, or isn't everything abandoned? And it's not entirely untrue. But what do you think blight to beauty can do for a city in changing its reputation?
I think that mindset of the average person outside of Detroit is the reason the mayor is doing it, right? The mayor has worked in Detroit for as long as I can remember, right? Probably before I was born. And so he remembers what Detroit looked like pre, bankruptcy, pre what it looked like, 8 years ago. And so when he's driving down, your Gratiot, these major corridors, and he sees what it's become, it's almost kind of like sad for him, right? And he's like, and anyone that knows the mayor knows that, he's the guy that goes against the stigma, right? He's going to be the guy to change the mindset. Hence why he ran for office, post bankruptcy. But I think that's what's really motivating him, is that he wants to see Detroit come back. And I know, a lot of people say, well, he's just a white guy from Livonia. Why does he care? But he truly, truly, truly does care about the city. And I think for him, it's like a legacy, right? He wants to leave the city better than when he took office. So that's what I think.
How close are you to Mayor Duggan?
I mean, we have a working relationship. I would say I'm, just as close as anyone else on his cabinet. I'm part of his cabinet.
Right. Is he, what is his, as much as you can tell us, what does his day look like? What does he like to spend time on? Does he have any interesting quirks?
So in my mind, there are two types of mayors, right? Historically, there's the, almost political, don't hold any of this against me, by the way, but almost like the political mayor that, is going out doing ribbon cuttings and, being the face of the city. And then there's your CEO mayor, right? He is very much a CEO mayor. So what does that mean? He's coming into the office and talking to every single department. He's got a standing meeting with every department, and like literally grinds into those departments to figure out what is wrong and how he can fix it. So for example, one of the things that keeps coming up in cabinet is like weekly miles driven in the DDOT department, right? So in short, it's the way that we measure if the buses, if we made pull out and buses came out on time and buses are on time across the city, is how many miles driven, not necessarily how many buses have pulled out, right? And so that's a metric that he puts up in cabinet every week. And, lately he's been saying, why is that number not going up more? And so, obviously the director's there and has an answer every week, but the mayor is never satisfied with, just what one person's telling him. Now the mayor wants to sit down with your entire department and talk to every single person down the chain and figure out what is the reason why these miles are not going up, right? Like that's the type of mayor he is. He likes to dig in there until he's satisfied with the answer he gets. He's very metric driven. So every week in cabinet, he's got, if you walk into our cabinet room, our entire wall is filled with charts, right, of metrics that he has to have reported out every single week. So that's how many houses have we demolished? How many shootings were there in the city? How many dog bites? He's on this dog bite kick lately. And he actually said yesterday, we had cabinet yesterday, and he's like, I'm going to call you every time I see a stray dog in the city until this number goes down. And so he's very metric driven. He's a different animal. But it works. So
how many dog bites do happen in Detroit?
Wait, I'm going to try to remember the number from yesterday. I think it was 2, maybe.
2, is that
2
weekly?
a week? 2 a week.
Okay, that's not bad in my mind.
No, but I guess for some reason the number has gone up and it's making the mayor furious. So he's like obsessed with getting that number down right now. So yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about your history and how you got involved in this. Now, you told Paul that your one of your marketing professors at Wayne State kind of convinced you, or you said lured you away from your private sector job. But I want to go back even further. What you went to Wayne State for undergrad?
Yes.
And what exactly did you study there?
So I studied marketing management. It was a marketing professor that I met.
And tell me about your experience at Wayne State. When did you graduate? What did you like about that? Was that your kind of first big exposure to the city of Detroit?
So it's funny. I graduated actually in 2015. I was still at the mayor's office when I graduated. I had just started the mayor's office when I graduated because I started in June of 2014. But I wasn't your typical college kid, right? Like I wasn't hanging out on campus or like at the library or anything like that. I grew up in Madison Heights. So I would hop on 75 and drive down to Wayne State. And then when my classes were over, I would hop back on 75 and drive back to Madison Heights. At the time, I was working for a billboard company, actually out here in Farmington Hills, on 12 and Orchard Lake. So technically, I guess I would be coming from my office. And then just, as soon as it was over, I couldn't wait to get back on the freeway and drive home, right? Like I had the same mentality that most suburbanites did back then, right? Like it's not safe to be here. Why would I hang around? And even when I got the call to interview for the mayor's office, I'm like, why would I want to work in Detroit? So it's interesting to see how my mindset has changed since then.
So you said you grew up in Madison Heights. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your childhood, your family. Any like particularly Chaldean things that happened to you or that influenced you?
I feel bad. I'm not that interesting of a person. But I mean, I grew up a normal kid, right? My parents were together at the time. Now they're divorced, but my parents were together. I grew up with, a younger sister. We're 1 year apart. And then my brother, we're 5 years apart. I went to Madison High School. No, I'm sorry. I went to Lamphere first. I failed gym, so I had to switch high schools.
They made you switch high schools because you failed gym.
So I was literally told I could not pass gym because I would not run the mile or swim. I don't know if you see my hair over here, but I had gym first hour, and I did not want to get chlorine.
And instead you decided to switch schools.
I had to. If I wasn't going to graduate, what was I going to do? Had I known what I knew in college, where my mentality was everything is negotiable, I probably would have tried to negotiate to graduate at Lamphere. But yeah, I ended up switching high schools. So I went to Madison High School, graduated from there, and then...
This is an inspiring story. You can still fail out of gym class and get to the mayor's office.
You can. So for all the kids listening... Stay strong. Keep going.
Wow. Okay, so you switched high schools in which year? Like year?
I was a junior at the new high school.
Okay.
Yep. And then graduated from there. I went to Oakland Community College for about a year and a half because I worked. So I started working pretty much full time when I was 15 years old. And so I was like, well, I can't quit my job. This is how I make money. So I went to Oakland Community College part-time and then eventually transferred to Wayne State. And then, that's where I was until I graduated.
What kind of job did you have at 15?
So I was a cashier at this grocery store called Produce Palace. I don't know if you remember it, but it's in Warren on 13 and DeQuinder. And I was a cashier for probably 3 or 4 years until I became a hostess at Champs in Troy. And then from there, I went to the advertising company in Farmington.
Wow. What made you go to the advertising company?
So I always wanted to work in an office, right? That's just like, I don't know, for some reason, that's what I wanted to do. I'm like, I'm really good with computers. I feel like I can, create a spreadsheet or two for someone. And so my mom's friend knew someone who worked there. And she was like, we really need an administrative assistant here. Is your daughter interested? And that's how I ended up there.
Well, that's nice. So your job there was administrative assistant, not really marketing or what you were specializing in?
So I started off as an administrative assistant, just kind of doing, your standard admin duties. And then I stayed with them for 5 or 6 years. It was owned by a Chaldean family, the Orem family. And so eventually I worked my way up. I was in charge of, all of the inventory, distributing all the work. I eventually left there being the office manager.
And then, explain how you left there and you were lured away to Mayor Duggan's office.
So at the time, my boss, Randy Orem, did a lot of work in the city. So he knew a lot of people in the city. And it was a woman who had worked with us who had left that went and started working on the mayor's campaign that called me and said, are you interested? There's a job. And so, I really, even at that time was like, there's no way I'm going to go work in Detroit. But, I love this girl, so I'm going to go, see what it's about. I'm just going to give a courtesy interview. So I go and do that. And the guy that interviewed me was Tom Lawand. At the time, he was the group executive for the Jobs and Economy team, the same team I'm on now. He's very persuasive. So I literally left there like, sure, I'll start in 3 weeks, I guess. And so went back to my boss and I said, I have some bad news. I think I'm going to work for Mayor Duggan. He's doing great things. There was one of my colleagues was like, you have to take this opportunity. Like, you can't pass it up. And when I told him, he was like, no, you're not leaving me. So
I have a question. What was so convincing from
Tom? Okay, so Tom was telling me about all the cool shit the mayor was doing, right? Like, he was like, yes, the mayor's number one focus right now is like actually like bringing back the basics, right? Like turning on the street lights, getting the garbage picked up. But after that, we're going to do all this cool shit. We're working on all these, big deals. We get to do whatever we want. It was just almost like a clean slate that I was walking into, right? Like, we were rebuilding the city again. And I just, kept thinking about what my marketing professor said at the time. It was almost like it's funny to say this because have you ever played SimCity?
Yeah, I think I've touched it.
Okay. You know how you like can build your own little city?
You're not going to compare this right now.
I'm not. I kind of a little bit. But it was like rebuilding your own little city, and I was a part of it. So it captured my attention. I was intrigued, and I wanted to do it. I'm like, this is the cool place to work. Like, this is where everyone's gonna want to work, right? And the mayor's all about hiring these like young and hungry kids. And I was one of them at the time. So I'm like, of course I want to be here. What
year did you get hired there?
I got hired there right when he took office in June of 2014.
Wow. And you were how old then?
Okay, let's do some math. I was probably 23. I'm 34 now.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you used your skills from college that you learned or your skills from this billboard company?
I mean, they're very different, right? Like, what I learned at International Outdoor, the billboard company, is how to like quasi manage a team because I wasn't, a manager or anything, but I was managing the entire office. I was always really, detailed and organized. So that I just kind of took with me. But what I learned at Wayne State is, specifically that class. I keep going back to this class because it was a marketing class, but you would use data to inform the marketing, right? So for example, I remember we'd go on these websites and we'd see data about like retail money that was being spent in the suburbs by Detroiters. And I'm like, that's crazy. How has no one solved for this yet? The fact that there are people in Detroit driving to, Somerset or Oakland Mall or wherever and spending their money and getting groceries from outside the city, and no one's figured out how to put a grocery store in the city that, has quality food like they do in the suburbs. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I kind of came into it with that mindset. So even when I started with the mayor's office, I wouldn't call myself your typical assistant, right? Like, for one, it's going to sound weird, but like the corner that I sat in, right? There was a lot going on. Like, people are talking in the hallways. I can hear my boss in his meetings. I'm, reading my boss's emails, right? Like, all of these things in my mind are gathering information to make me more effective at my job. And that's how I, quickly rose up the ranks, right? Like, I'd be putting pieces together whenever people would talk to me. Like, my boss is talking to me about setting up a meeting, and then I hear a conversation in the hallway, and I'm like, oh, that's why he's asking me to set up this meeting. And so I began to kind of just like have this like memory bank of information that became valuable eventually, especially as people left, right? Like, now I have institutional knowledge. So now as new people are coming in and trying to figure out, why is this project on my desk? Or why is this guy coming to talk to me about this? Or what's this person talking about? I can say, and I'm probably one of the very few left that can actually do this because I've been there for so long. I can say, back in 2015, we worked on this project, and so and so happened, XYZ happened on it, and that's why we're here today. That's why you have what's in front of you today. That I find very valuable. But at the time, I'm just like kind of like a nosy kid, like, oh, I want to know everything that's going on, and now it all makes sense. So
I like that phrase you used, institutional knowledge. So you've been there almost 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like people have, sort of revolving door type of situation. People have left, new people have come in, and you've been there the whole time, able to bring people in and teach them while also taking people with more experience than you and learning from them. So how do you think that has changed the role you have, or maybe to talk about how your actual role has changed since you started there?
Yeah, so I would say it's interesting because the role I have now is the role that I watched my bosses at the time play, right? Back in 2014 to probably 17 or 18, in my opinion, that was like prime days for the administration, right? Like, we were doing big shit. I mean, we're still doing big shit, but we were doing big shit. The team was, very tight knit, and we all worked very well together. We all had been there for a few years together. It was great. And now I think that the position I'm in is kind of like trying to maintain that era, if you will, of the administration by myself, which is crazy because, we've got a whole new team. I don't even know half the people in these departments anymore. But I'm effective. I think I can be successful at it because I watched it happen, for the last 10 years. So I'd say that's how it's evolved.
So what, if you could clue us in, what are some of the big projects you guys have planned or you're working on?
I can talk about some of them. I mean, the biggest one is probably the Ross related companies and the Illich project. That's the District Detroit. So that we actually just voted on that last night out of the Brownfield. I sit on the Brownfield board and voted that out last night. They're in the middle of their community benefit meetings right now, which will wrap up in I think a week or two. But they're redeveloping 10 buildings in the district downtown. That's office, that's hotel, that's a brand new U of M Innovation Center. This is $1.5 billion development, right? Wow. Like, it's crazy. I can't even tell you how many people are working on that project because it's so many. So that's one. Then
let's talk about that. Okay. I've heard some criticism about that project, mm-hmm. Not necessarily on your side, but the Little Caesars Arena, it was sold as a big project with District Detroit surrounding it. Mm-hmm. And it's been several years now since it was built. It's a beautiful arena. Actually, I was there a few days ago to see the Red Wings, which is one of my favorite things to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful place. But I've heard some people talk about how they're kind of waiting for the District Detroit to happen. Not that it's, there are some good restaurants in the arena. There's the plaza is outside.
There's a Sahara that's opening
Yes,
later this year.
Sahara's opening.
I've been waiting for that.
How amazing. So maybe you can kind of give some perspective to that criticism on why does it take so long to do this stuff, and then go into what are the efforts that are going on now. It sounds like there's some decent headway being made.
Yeah, so that has definitely been coming up. One thing I'll say is that, yes, everyone knows the Eliases, gave empty promises back then, right? No doubt. But the one thing I would say to keep in mind is that, especially, knowing this because I work in the city, doing development in the city is really hard, right? It's not like doing development anywhere. I mean, Stephen Ross is telling us, I developed Hudson Yards in New York, and Detroit is by far the hardest city to develop in. And that's because, a number of things, right? Our tax millage is the highest in the country. The workforce we just don't have. And so if you don't have the workforce, then everything else is more expensive. The price of materials has gone up. And maybe these are not factors that, were at play for why the district didn't get developed, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But now I would say they have Stephen Ross as their partner, one of the, biggest developers in the country, with a shit ton of money, everyone knows. And he's done this, right, across the country. He knows what he's doing. He's one of the largest affordable housing developers. He's bringing, I think it's almost 700 housing units. I can't remember what percentage of those are affordable, but 700 housing units to this development, thousands of jobs, a hotel, like the U of M Innovation Center that's really anchoring the entire thing. I think it's a new day for the Eliases. But what I'll say about the criticism is just, what I was saying earlier is that it's really, really hard to develop in Detroit. It's not, I think people sometimes think that these developers are, putting up a building and making millions of dollars, and that's just not the case. It actually takes a long time for you to get a return on your development in the city. And so I think that we need to do a better job of kind of educating the community about that. Maybe it wouldn't be as hard, because even like trying to get approvals through city council is so hard, right? Because again, everyone just thinks that we're giving free money out, and that just simply isn't true. So one of the things that we keep saying with the district project as we do this roadshow across the city is like, if they do not build it, and this really speaks to the criticism, if we do not build this, there are no tax incentives, right? Like in order to even get $1 from the whatever it is, $700 million are asking for, or whatever the number is, we have to build this thing. And so that is what people have to hold on to, as opposed to, 10, 20 years ago, right? Like, yes, we made a promise and we didn't do it, but now understand that we don't get $1 from you unless we build this thing. And so, I don't know, hopefully that changes people's minds. We'll see. I hope they put up all 10 buildings and fill the office spaces. We'll see. But it looks good so far.
Well, that's good news to hear from an insider.
Yeah.
Probably the best news in a while.
Yeah.
What are some other projects? What are the things you're most excited about?
So the other big project that I'm excited about was just announced yesterday. It's a partnership between the Detroit Pistons and Henry Ford. So they're going to build a $1 billion brand new hospital over in New Center where they're at. They're going to build a new hotel as part of that development. I think there's some retail in there, some new office space. So that's a really exciting project. We're getting ready to, we'll start the community benefit meetings on that probably later this year. So that's a big, exciting one. What's another?
How are the Pistons involved in that?
So the Pistons have partnered because I think it's, don't quote me because I haven't been following it that closely, but I I want to say it's they're like the Henry Ford is the preferred health provider for the Pistons, and so that's
I see.
yeah the team's medical center
Sure.
essentially.
I see.
Yeah.
They're providing a lot of brand name.
Well, I guess.
So what other things were you about to say?
Oh, there is I don't know if you followed the legislature voted on a new tax, I guess, for the convention center downtown. And so there's a new hotel going up as part of that new hotel attached to the convention center. So Kobo, you probably know it as. And there'll be a new, I think it's a 500-room hotel going up there. So that's exciting, right by the old Joe Louis Arena site. So that's another big one later this year. And then, there's a bunch of like little projects going on across the city, but those are like the three big ones this year that I think everyone is watching closely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so while you're aware of, and I'm sure you're involved in these projects to some extent, you are now kind of taking care of a lot of the smaller things. What is your most exciting, or maybe you can give us an example of something that you're working on specifically?
So I just started literally last week. So I'm still kind of building out the landscape and like kind of surveying the corridors to see where I should start. I can tell you that my strategy right now is to go after kind of like, because I know I'm not going to have, all the money in the world, right? You could give me $100 million and it's still not enough to rebuild the neighborhoods. But with whatever budget I do get, I'm kind of going through and making a list of like, I call it the cream of the crop, right? Like on each corridor, what is the property that we need to take care of, that we need to either white box or demolish or, market or whatever the intervention may be? What is the property that would make a difference to create a market in these corridors? So like Gratiot and 7 Mile, for example, right? Our investors right now are kind of hesitant to put any more money into that corridor because they're like, well, there's just no market, right? Without redoing the streetscape, without, a thriving business on this corridor, it's hard to turn Gratiot and 7 Mile into what Livernois and 6 Mile is today, right? It's just not there right now. And so what I'm kind of figuring out is, how do I recreate the Livernois corridor across the city? We're kind of doing that on West Warren now. West Warren was a lot worse than what it is right now, but it's getting there. Verner's another big focus. Like I said, Gratiot, East Warren, the Dexter Davison area. So, I mean, right now you drive down those corridors and you're like, there's nothing here. So what I'm trying to do is really instigate a market.
So we've talked about blight to beauty, and that's certainly a big part of the perception of Detroit. But what do you think Detroit needs, like physically? What are its needs in those areas that you're looking at developing? Do they need grocery stores? Do they need social services? In your mind, what do you think are the best kind of businesses or departments to have there?
So the good news is I don't have to guess because in 2018, maybe, the DEGC, the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, conducted a retail market study across the city and surveyed all the residents around these corridors and said, what do you want to see? And so a lot of it is the same across the city, but some of it is different. So Gratiot 7, if I'm remembering correctly, is like, we need more gas station. It's basic stuff, right? That like you don't really think of, but they need. So a gas station, a grocery store, a barber shop, a laundromat. Like, yes, some of this stuff is there, but not nearly as enough to meet the demand. Over on Jefferson, there's a property, we call it Parcel 492, but there's a property close to the Grosse Pointe border next to a shopping center, and it needs a grocery store so bad, right? And you would think, like, why is it so hard to put a grocery store there? You're literally like en route to Grosse Pointe where there's a ton of money. Like, why is it so hard to put one there? So we've tried, and the feedback is that you just don't have enough traffic. The market is not there to be able to sustain a grocery store, which is like so crazy, but that's what we're working on. So then you ask yourself, okay, so then what creates a market, right? Is it redoing the streetscape? Is it building more housing? And all these things play into what it would take to create a thriving corridor, right? Like I keep going back to Gratiot 7 because I'm like, I'm going to revive Gratiot 7 Mile, right? Like the mayor is like, I cannot go to these residents and say we gave up, and I will not do that. And so like one of my biggest focuses is Gratiot 7 Mile. And so I'm like, why don't we start by redoing the streetscape? Well, it's not that easy. Gratiot is a state-owned road. So now, the mayor and I have to go convince the state to prioritize that road, put some money into that road. Then we can start, building out the commercial buildings. We're trying to do it in parallel. It doesn't always align that way. It'd be easier if it was a city-owned road. We just got a $24 million federal grant. That was when I was leading federal affairs, but a $24 million federal grant to kind of implement these, interventions across the city to make the roads safer. We're starting on city roads because that was the easiest thing to do. So, some of my strategy will be to align with that work, right? Like if we're doing, more bike lanes and pedestrian crosswalks on, I don't know, let's call it Finkel. I'm not even sure if that's a city-owned road, but maybe I focus, some money over there. Maybe I'm, focusing on some commercial buildings over there to align with the investment that we're already putting in there. I know. So there's a woman in the administration that's working on this citywide parking strategy. She's got a whole bunch of money where she can go into these commercial corridors and buy parcels, or in some cases, like we own the parcels already, and she resurfaces them and creates parking lots to help support some of these small businesses, right? That's going to feed into my strategy as well, right? Like if there's 3-4 storefronts where she's building a $2 million parking lot behind it. Maybe I'm marketing, the 4 storefronts on that corridor. And, there's just so many factors that play into it. It's just all about a strategy. I can't boil the ocean. I said yesterday, I was like, I can't boil the ocean, guys. Let me just try to find a handful of the lowest hanging fruit, start there, and then build it out.
Right. That's a good mentality. Have you spent much time talking to the residents in your area, or is it just too much to handle?
I will. I don't live, on these corridors. I actually live downtown, right across the street from the new arena. But I don't live in the neighborhoods next to these corridors, so I don't know what they need, right? So the team I'm building out, absolutely. We will be in the neighborhood saying, I'm going to market this property, and we got proposals for, either a grocery store or a shopping plaza or whatever it is. Are you guys cool with that? Is that what you guys want to see here? Is there demand for that? Because the last thing I want to do is, support a business that is going to fail. So yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever done kind of surveying like that?
I'm sure I've done something like that in the almost 10 years I've been with the mayor. But the only times I can remember where I've gone door to door and I'm told that they're going to try to limit how much I do this because I was too embarrassing apparently, is when I'm knocking on doors for either it's, city council members or, there was a time where I was, trying to get this auto manufacturer through, it was District 3 and towards the industrial park, right? And I went door to door with the council member, knocked on doors and said, hey, come to this community meeting. We're going to talk about this new auto manufacturer coming to the neighborhood. But then my colleagues told me that apparently you can't, if they don't answer the door, you can't just look in the window and ask them to open the door. So I don't know how much door knocking I'll be doing.
Well, you've learned since then.
Yeah, I have learned since then.
Good. So I read about this project a few months ago where they're going to implement an electric charging road in Detroit.
Yeah. So when I was on the government affairs team, yesterday, MDOT, the state transportation department, received a $25 million grant to redo Michigan Avenue over by the old train station where Ford is. And what that road will look like post renovation is a center running AV lane. Because right now I think Michigan Avenue is like 4 lanes in each direction, right? That'll come down significantly to make room for bike lanes, to make room for wider sidewalks, for outdoor patios, and a left turning lane we'll finally have. And so that road was done in partnership with Ford and Cavnew, who's building the electrified road to Ann Arbor. And so the $25 million will go towards that from 96 all the way to Campus Martius. And so that is the first public EV charging road in Detroit.
So to be clear, what this is wireless
So instead of plugging in your
charging.
car, instead of plugging in your EV car, you are just driving on this road and it's charging while you're driving.
So this is a kind of weird technology if you haven't been exposed to it. I remember a few years ago or whenever it came out, these wireless phone chargers just kind of started appearing, and I didn't even know this new technology was created, or and they just started appearing there, and then you could buy one, and now it's in my car.
Yeah.
And now they've gone quite a leap further, which is you can literally charge your electric vehicle. The advantage is the batteries are on the bottom of these vehicles, right? So without contacting the road, it's being charged.
Yeah.
To me, that's like pretty amazing
crazy.
technology.
It's crazy.
I never would have thought to see that in a few years.
Yeah. I just found out about the wireless charging for your phone just a few months ago. Someone gave me like a little stand that I could put my phone on. I'm like, oh my God, my case is on and it's charging. Like, how's this happening? So I literally just hopped on that trend like 2 months ago. So I'm late to the game too. It's okay.
I thought, I mean, as a kid, I like dreamed of wireless charging.
Yeah.
Like, why couldn't you just grab electricity from the air?
Right.
And then they just made it without any. I thought there would be a big announcement or something.
You were dreaming of that as a kid?
Swear to God,
Are you like a little genius?
No. Maybe when I was younger, but not anymore. Yeah, that's a cool project. Any other things you want to mention?
No, I'm just happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. What about? Do you have any advice or last words for aspiring Chaldeans? Maybe people who are in marketing and looking for a career change or interested in the type of stuff that you want, about maybe try to motivate them a little bit.
My first suggestion would be to call me because I'm building out a team. So if you're interested in working in Detroit, please call me. I'm happy to, hire a fellow Chaldean whenever I can. And two, I just say, when I was in college and I was pursuing marketing, I started actually pre-law and I got bored of it, so changed it to marketing management. I always thought, man, I'm going to be stuck in this field. Like, I'm going to have to do something in marketing now, so I better not get bored, right? And look at me, right? Like, maybe there's like a little bit of marketing to my job, but barely. So I would just say, it's okay to change careers whenever you feel like it. You don't have to, stick to whatever they teach you in college, and that's all.
It's great. Thank you again, Amanda, for coming on here.
Thank you.
It's great talking with you.
Yes.
And I'm sure the listeners will enjoy this interview.
Awesome. Thank you.